Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Defence Eye podcast, week 2 of the US-Israel-Iran war. And this week we're going to take a closer look at what's happening on the naval side of the conflict. Very important for the price of oil and gas and global trade, which is impacting on economies around the world. And how that plays out over the next couple of days or weeks could impact everybody's heating bills, everybody's political situation, and that the outcome of this war, perhaps more so than the actual events on the battlefield between the combatants. Francis, how could countries who are not part of this conflict intervene and stabilise the oil exports through the Straits of Hormuz?
Well, the issue here is whether you could get, and I'm just going to throw some random names out, India, South Korea, Japan, who are not belligerents, whether they could put together, and we'll use the old Royal Navy term for it, an armilla patrol to basically escort tankers, especially tankers, but container ships, through the Straits of Hormuz. But of course, to do that, you actually have to be able to tell the Iranian regime, we are not combatants, but if you try anything, we will stonk on you from a great height. So it's a slightly difficult one to say, on one hand, we're neutral, but we might end up as belligerents if you come after us.
I mean, a lot of focus here in the UK, of course, is on the participation of the Royal Navy. But as we've heard, there's a major issues in getting ships to sea from the Royal Navy. But it wouldn't just be a British force, it'd have to be multinational because it's not just the UK affected. This is a global problem.
Very much so. And so it's then a question of how can you affect a coalition at a time when you've got US ships, US planes, and we should remember rocket artillery firing across the Gulf at Iranian targets. Again, very difficult to coordinate until American forces out there, look, can you just keep an eye open? We're escorting tankers through. It's not beyond the realms of possibility to do this, but it would require some work, and one would hope that the talk has started with India, Japan, South Korea, those sort of navies, all of which, by the way, are pretty big. India, okay, it's been getting a lot of oil from Russia, but the others, South Korea and Japan especially, they are much more dependent on the Gulf for their petrochemicals and petro energy.
Well, and also the Indians, of course, are pretty close, so could get their ships into action pretty quickly and could have an impact a lot quicker than European navies could, and even Far Eastern navies.
Very much so, but it would have to be a joint combined operation. The idea of ships on their own, you would want some form of air cover, you would want ISTAR and so forth, and actually you would want some form of intel link into the US forces out there for them to say, keep an eye out for this and that. So trying to have, as it were, an arm's length operation to escort through the Straits of Hormuz, one that does not involve the US forces out there, I don't think is doable.
I mean, it's also quite interesting that the actual attacks on shipping in the Gulf region, inside the Arabian Gulf and out in the wider region, have not actually been very significant. This is more an issue of collapse of confidence, which has led to the insurance companies pulling the plug on their insurance cover or ramping up the price. So maybe this just has to be a show of force to provide that reassurance to allow trade to resume.
I would say, apropos, your point well made on the fact that we haven't yet seen any massive shipping attacks. Is that because, bearing in mind, we do know the US has hit Iranian naval bases massively. Have they also at the same time targeted anti-ship missile sites, barracks where the anti-ship missiles are kept? From memory, in the 1980s, that is what the US did several times. They hit anti-ship missile sites to make sure that the shipping lanes were clear. So, question mark, and I think looking at the maps, if you look at more southeast Iran, you'll see lots of those explosion marks. Was that not just taking out the Iranian Navy, but also taking out the anti-ship missiles? But then, to speak to your point, if that is what has happened, the US has got to make that clear they've done this to try and get some confidence back in the insurance market. But there will still have to be escorts. I think every insurer would say, thank you, but I'd prefer it if there was a couple of nice light grey ships on the north side protecting us.
I mean, and the other issue here, of course, is it's not just the Straits of Hormuz, the thing everyone's focusing on at the moment. It's the Red Sea, which, of course, is home to the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who, after 2023, caused mayhem with global shipping in the Red Sea. Now, they have publicly declared their allegiance or alliance with the Iranian government in its current conflict with the US and Israel, made some threats against shipping in the Red Sea, but they haven't actually fired their weapons yet. But that would produce a double escort challenge.
Very much so. And again, you would hope that northward, people are looking at this. There are still, I believe, French, Italian, and possibly one Spanish frigate in the Red Sea. But if you are going to have to escort, and remember, the Houthis have fired ballistic missiles at ships. So it's not just a question of we have to cover, just for the sake of argument, 150 kilometers south of the Bab el-Mandab and then 150 kilometers north of the border with Saudi Arabia. You're having to look nearly to the top of the Red Sea. So you would need some form of air defense assets. And I suspect the Saudis will be saying, we're not moving them from the Persian Gulf side. Find someone else who's got the either surface-to-air missiles or the anti-air warfare ships to cover the north end of the Red Sea.
Okay. Now, this oil crisis, natural gas crisis, hydrocarbons crisis is not just about the ships and the Straits of Hormuz or the Red Sea. We're also seeing an increasing number of oil, gas installations ashore being attacked. I mean, these are really difficult places to defend against small drones, and a small drone can hit and cause a quite big conflagration in these sites. So, yes, you have a naval presence to provide that reassurance, but the Gulf states are, so far, their air defenses are holding up against swarms of Iranian drones. But the issue is, how long can they keep that up and protect their oil infrastructure?
The answer is that they're going to have to keep it up. I think what we are seeing, which may come over as a declaration of the absolute bleeding obvious, is you cannot base your entire GBAD, ground-based air defense, on a system such as Patriot. It is just lethally expensive. And as we know, there are bottlenecks in Patriot production at the moment, and European countries like Sweden and Switzerland have been told they won't get deliveries for at least 2 years beyond the delayed date at the moment. So the issue of having layered air defenses, so Patriot or SAMP-T, the Franco-Italian-British system at the top end, and then a Sky Sabre or RST below that, and then, well, if it's man-pads like lightweight modular missile, Martlet, yep, fine. But then I suspect the case for anti-aircraft artillery is now not a nice-to-have. I would suggest it is a must-have.
But we've also seen some quite innovative attempts by the Gulf states to layer their own air defenses. Yesterday, the UAE put out some quite impressive video of Apache attack helicopters engaging drones with their 30mm cannon. Now, all these countries have got quite big forces of helicopters that they could put up and do patrols, and then have their fighter aircraft a bit further out, trying to whittle down the first wave of these drones, and then the helicopters come in, and then you've got your ground-based air defense. So it's a question of how quickly they can get their integration efforts going to bolster their defenses.
And I suppose what is interesting was the Israelis in the 12-day war last year, who we saw them repurposing Apaches. And it's not they've said now Apache won't do ground attack, but it has taken on a bit more of a primary role as a counter-drone, counter-cruise missile. And I, for one, am not surprised that the Gulf states have gone, that's an interesting idea, let's look at it. But again, it is about integrating what assets you have. But I would note Saudi Arabia has been talking about buying used to be called SHORAD, but all these categories have changed so much. They used to have Crotal, French supplied, and that was more down towards their border with Yemen. They've been thinking about buying a replacement for 10 years and have never got round to buying complete system. I suspect they would, as when some form of peace returns, I suspect they will say, right, we can't just rely on Patriot. It is too, even for them, it's too expensive.
It's also quite interesting how these Gulf states are trying to reassure their publics. I mean, these are not countries that normally have sort of engagement with their societies, that they're sort of absolute monarchies, but they have been putting out public relations statements about the attacks. Their rulers have been out and about amongst the public, trying to reassure them, and they are engaging their populations in sort of home defense activities, trying to warn them to stay inside during attacks, but they're also announcing stuff about trying to stop videos of targets being circulated online to prevent bomb damage assessment by the Iranians. So it's quite a sort of dynamic situation with how these countries are dealing with these attacks.
I think each conflict, or whatever you want to call it, we've had over the last 3-4 years, we see new aspects of social media coming forward and their effect on the battlefield almost directly. And actually, to go away from the Middle East and come back to more European, a degree of, should we just say, embarrassment that a video was put up by the UK MOD of the Defence Readiness and Industry Minister Luke Pollard in a repair facility in Ukraine, British staffed with Ukrainians, and people pointing out there was a number of features you could see in the video which someone would be able to geolocate, looking for similar features and so forth. I think in a lot of cases, militaries around the world are still catching up with this type of problem. Whether you can stop it, well, possibly in the UAE, you could just turn off all the mobile phones and the internet. The only example I can remember of an armed force basically stopping comms, it was the Israelis going into Gaza in 2006, and they literally confiscated every mobile phone of all of the troops. And so that's why there was then, at that stage, nothing came out. But that is strange, and I think undoable, probably.
I mean, we've also seen coverage today of criticism that Google Earth have images of RAF Akrotiri on their service, and showing the location of the American U-2 spy planes, saying that this may have aided the Iranian drone attack a week or so ago, which hit the hangar of the American U-2 contingent at the base.
Absolutely, but again, isn't it actually strange that, bearing in mind that fact, that President Trump hasn't gone to Google and said, look, take these images down, blur stuff out, and for so, was this just an accident of omission by the Pentagon? They didn't request this. But it's also been noted that China has been putting a lot of imagery up free of charge, and that is perhaps just a piece of the information war piece. That, hey, fine, you may want to try and deny access to Google Earth or whatever, but hey, China will step in and they will provide the info.
I mean, also we've seen today, this is day 9 of the war, reports from Turkey about ballistic missiles going over Iraq, Syria, and towards the southeast corner of Turkey by the Mediterranean, and being intercepted by NATO Patriot batteries. Now, that also we had a report of sirens going off at RAF Akrotiri, which, if you do the trajectories, it's downrange. from that part of Turkey, from Iran. So the ballistic missile defense of Cyprus is obviously a top priority. And past couple of days, the American carrier battle group the Gerald Ford has been in that region, so has provided some coverage. But she has since gone through the Suez Canal, I think on Sunday. So the need to get Allied ships, HMS Dragon from Britain and from France and other countries with a proper ballistic missile defense capability into the Eastern Mediterranean has definitely gone up the priority list.
Completely. And we said we weren't going to go into all the myriad issues of HMS Dragon. I would just note, I suspect this particular conflict ought to force the MOD, the services, and more importantly, the politicians to think again about issues such as readiness. And we both know, you talk about things like missile defense and air defense with the MOD, and they give answers along the lines of, we are capable of putting together a tailored air defense package as and when required to meet the threat. Well, what we've seen in the past week plus is the time when you know what the threat is almost certainly a day too late. It's already happened. And I think two things, that there should be a T-45 at always probably even less than 5 days notice to move. And I am aware there is a cost, both human for the sailors, but also a physical cost. I think the other one is, at one level, if you're looking just at RAF Akrotiri, a Type 45 defending it against missiles is a bit of a waste of ship. We need to be looking back at GBAT, ground-based air defence, and not held at Thorney Island with Royal Artillery. No, deployed at Akrotiri. And by the way, we need the same at Marham, Coningsby, especially Brize Norton and Lossiemouth. The days of believing the home base is safe. Akrotiri is sovereign base area. It is sovereign British soil. And for some reason, we've always believed it was more or less safe and we could operate with impunity. Well, those days are gone.
It's also quite interesting how the Cyprus issue has brought up the fact that that part of the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, has got overlapping military organizations there, which what perhaps more would benefit all of them would be some kind of streamlined and coordinated ability to plug together all their resources and produce a defense capability that's massively bigger than the small parts that are there. So you've got the British, of course, there with their air base and potentially HMS Dragon. You've got the Cypriots, who've got some Russian-made surface-to-air missiles. You've got the French and the Greeks, who are piling in there. They've already got some stuff there, and they're sending more. President Macron's there today. Then you've got the Turks, who have their bit of northern Cyprus and their mainland, and you've got NATO, who are in Turkey, in that corner.
And you've missed one, Tim. You've missed one in terms of the Eastern Mediterranean, Egypt.
Egypt.
And actually,
okay.
the glue that binds this together, I have to say, is France. France is a NATO member. As you pointed out, President Macron in Greece, there are very tight defence links at the moment between Greece and France, which have been cultivated very carefully over the last decade plus. There are equally tight defence links between Egypt and France. You would probably, if I would say, right, who should be the lead, it would be, can we get the French to take the lead in forging some form of local command centre, which, as you say, ties all these disparate elements in to make the sum larger than the parts.
I mean, it's not as if there's a lack of capability in this region. It's making it all work together to produce a layered effect, to cover the gaps between different countries' territories, so you don't get leakage of weapons coming from whoever is firing them.
No, absolutely. But in the middle of a shooting war, people's tensions are probably elsewhere. But if there is at least a ceasefire, a slowing down, then serious conversations about how this is done, you would hope they would have.
But this sort of raises a wider point, maybe, that up to now, NATO, European Union, has left missile defence to the United States. They have been the lead player in all these exercises, and they've brought all the assets to the table. And all the other countries have, followed in behind their lead. So maybe this is the time for Europe, the UK, to think on its own, to have its own. We've got plenty of assets, its own command doctrine, its own command capability to whenever this, in the future, all these wars always start in places you don't expect. So they can establish a missile air defense shield from nothing in somewhere where there isn't.
This is underway, Tim. Not last Paris Air Show, the one before, so that'll be 2022. Just before the air show, to the chagrin of the French, Germany announced it was setting up the European Sky Shield initiative with tiered air defense, with Germany as the leader. And they were saying, look, we're basing this on Arrow for the high-level ballistic missile intercept, Patriot, and then the German RST, surface-launched missile. They've said, you can join and not buy these particular surface-to-air missile systems. I suspect you are right that what we have seen over the last 8-9 days will accelerate the European Sky Shield initiative. And I repeat something, a number of European countries have been told by the US their Patriot deliveries are being delayed. And so I think there will be a move away from a number of Patriot systems. I suspect the system that is most likely to benefit will be the Deal IRIS-T, especially the extra long-range variant. And it's a mixture of US unreliability, will they be here when we need them? The fact they can't supply. And yeah, I think a full ground-based air defense command, whatever you want to call it, I think is now basically inevitable.
Well, we've gone through naval, missile air defense. I mean, this war is throwing up plenty of new threads, interests, angles, issues, which are having to be addressed in real time. So we'll next time come back, look at something completely different. I mean, who knows where this war is going to go in the next week? I mean, we started off 9 days ago with American strikes and Israeli strikes decapitating the Iranian regime. We've now gone to mass drone attacks across the Gulf, naval issues, economic warfare, psychological warfare. So, this conflict is just spreading its tentacles across the world into huge aspects of global life, military issues, defense, economics. So stay tuned for the next issue of the Defense Eye podcast.